Hello, it's Patrick Usher here, and this is my first video on this channel in a very long time indeed. It's been about 5.5 years, in fact. And I'm going to talk today about one of the main reasons for my absence. But I am hopeful to restart this channel now with quite a lot of new content. I have lots of things I want to talk about. But first I need to talk about the difficulties that I have gone through in that time frame. So unfortunately, I actually became ill again, and for people who kind of don't know the overall story, back in 2014, 2015, I was sick with POTS and sort of chemical sensitivity, and I recovered from those conditions. I wrote a book about why I thought the brain retraining program that I followed, DNRS, worked for POTS. That book was called POTS, What It Really Is and Why It Happens. And then I was well for 3 years and I was living my life. Unfortunately, I became ill again, not with POTS this time, but with the closely related ME-CFS. I have also had orthostatic issues this time around, but they've been different to the last time. This did not happen out of the blue. It happened because of a very significant stressor that I went through for many years. And I'll describe more about that in a moment. But this journey has been very difficult. It's been much harder than the first time. And I've been much sicker as well. Now, thankfully, I have got better. I have improved. I've still got a long way to go, but I'm much more functional now than I was. So I have been ill for about 5 years, and for the first half of that time, my life was very limited. So I was maybe down at around 2,000 to 3,000 steps. I was largely housebound. If I crashed, I would be bedridden for that period. And I also had periods where I was bedridden much longer. So the record was about 6 weeks for that. And in mid-2020 until early 2021, I was severely ill. So during that period, and I will be talking about this in separate videos, I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but during that period, I actually experienced multiple life-threatening episodes related to ME-CFS. It's not often appreciated that that can happen, but unfortunately it did. And thankfully those are resolved. So, it's been a rough period. Since around early 2021, I have been more stable. I have got stronger, particularly from the end of 2021. I became much more functional, and I've had a lot of periods since mid-2022, which have been independent living. So previous to that, I was living with my dad for a lot of it, not all of it, by any means. But I've had a lot more attempts at independent living, including right now. And these generally, they've been mixed, but there is an upward trend, which is encouraging. And I'm much stronger now. I can walk somewhere around 7,000 steps per day. I can manage my life. I'm able to engage in a lot more things than I was. So I am moving in the right direction. And I think I've just learned an awful lot more about these kinds of illnesses than the sort of things I talked about on the channel before, the sort of things I talked about in my book. And I have a much better understanding of all the different factors that go on in these kinds of illnesses. One of the things that I had to grapple with after I became sick again is that I had written a book saying that I'd rewired my brain and I got better. And, for POTS and chemical sensitivity. And, that was fine that I did get better, so it was true at the time. But then when I became sick again, what I found with brain retraining is that it would help me. It would help soften autonomic symptoms like noise sensitivity or excessive stress response of various kinds, generally the sense of the nervous system being sensitized. And that was good, but it's never really helped me move beyond that this time around. I haven't found that it's had an impact on removing post-exertional malaise, for example. And so this has forced me to rethink some of my assumptions And ultimately, it's not that I completely disagree with the things that I was saying before. I actually do still think that the nervous system dysregulation is at the root of these kinds of illnesses. But I also believe now that there can develop very strong secondary dysfunctions that may become so powerful and so embedded that they actually stop you from making progress in and of themselves. And at that point, one wonders, what is actually more important for someone to make progress? Is it the brain retraining, or is it resolving a secondary dysfunction if a treatment exists for that? So I have learned an awful lot more, and I want to be someone who now shares what I have learned in a way that I hope speaks to the reality of these illnesses better. Because I think some people do recover marvelously well with brain retraining programs, and other people, they do it and they improve a bit but make no further progress, or they do it and it does nothing for them. And so we need to think about why that is, and I think that now I'm in a position to really talk about that far better than I was before. So I had to grapple with the fact that I'd written this hypothesis, and I was changing my own mind about what I had written. So what do I do then in that circumstance? And I wanted to find a balance between the different perspectives that I had previously and now. As I say, it's not like I completely disagree at all with what I'd written before. I agree with quite a lot of it. But what my thinking was the following. First of all, as I'll share in a moment, the reasons I became ill again were quite specific to me. And people do become ill again after they recover. It's not actually that uncommon. I know other people who have done brain retraining, recovered, and then got sick again. So it's not uncommon, but in my case, the particular stressor was, as I said, not out of the blue. It was extremely stressful, and I'll talk about it a bit later in the video. So I had that factor that's probably not going to happen to other people. Secondly, I have regularly received messages from people who really appreciate the book and the previous videos on this channel, and who have said that they've made a lot of progress or recovered, and that the ideas I put out were a helpful framework for them. So that's valuable. Thirdly, as I said, I do still believe that the root cause of these illnesses is in the brain. It just may or may not be the case that addressing the root cause always leads to the improvement one would hope, depending on what else has developed in the body. So I still think it's important to have that idea out there. I'm aware that I was always still trying to place that neurological framework in the context of the other research into these conditions, like the research that's going on showing biomedical abnormalities in the body. So what I decided to do in the end was leave the book up on Amazon, but I wrote out a list of changes that I would make to it now. I put that on the book's website, whatpotsreallyis.net, and then on the Amazon page I said, for how my thinking has changed since the book was published back in 2017, please go to this website. And so people can read the modifications that I would make to the book before they choose to buy it or not. So in that way, I felt that I was still comfortable to have the book out there, and that by showing the modifications I would make, it was still valuable for people. And then the other thing that I did was I also went through the videos on my YouTube channel, and I unlisted the ones that I didn't feel that I was fully behind anymore. And finally, I also lowered the price of the Amazon book to the lowest possible, so that would be reflective of the fact that it wasn't actually something that I fully stood behind, but still recognized that it's valuable for people, and that they weren't, forking out a lot of cash to buy it. So those were the decisions that I made, and when I was thinking about how to reflect the changes in my own thinking. So I'm going to talk now about how I actually became, or why I became ill again. And it's quite an unusual reason. I've not come across it in anyone else in terms of talking about how they became ill with these sorts of illnesses. Unfortunately, it was a continuous stressor. And it happened because of multiple knee injuries over time, and also I had an incident where my foot was partially run over in a car incident. And these factors kind of co-conspired to lead me to develop a quite serious dysfunction in my walking. And basically what would happen was that my legs stopped working, all the different functions in my legs stopped working, various muscles, nearly all the muscles became very weak, and muscles that you wouldn't want to work were instead recruited to try and perform basic actions, and things just fell apart. And what would happen would be that I would try and walk, the muscles in my legs would seize up, I would have a lot of pain, and I actually couldn't move, and I would have to lie down. And this started, back in 2018, and it was a daily stressor, because normally we never think about walking. We just walk. It's a natural thing. People usually don't have problems with it, even if they're not walking perfectly. But in my case, I actually would have situations where I might be able to get somewhere, but then I couldn't get back. And my legs were just in agony. And, I had huge difficulty getting up and down stairs. I was stressed out of my tiny mind about this, because every time you move, you are reminded of how well you're able to walk or not, So this was very stressful. I went to a lot of physiotherapists. I worked with some of them over a long period of time. And while they had helpful ideas, things were so severely dysfunctional in my legs that they couldn't help me fix it. And the only way I could manage was by over-controlling my walking, by trying to recruit better muscles. But it was always like inches away from, or moments away from it all falling apart. And this went on for years. I just had periods every day of being in agony, basically. And because I could over-control my walking, other people wouldn't realize that actually I was struggling with this. So they, when I tried to tell them, they would think I was completely nuts. But, something that I learned after a certain point is just don't tell people. Because you just, it just sounds so strange. But unfortunately, that's what happened. And for about 3 years, it was that severe. Just everyday periods of hell, basically, where I was in agony. And slowly but surely, through my own studies of physiotherapy, I managed to improve this. I'm not a natural physiotherapist. And as you can imagine, if you have an illness like ME-CFS, doing physiotherapy could be a really bad idea, because you could crash you. And I cannot say how many crashes I've had because of that. But fortunately, it got better over time. And then from about 2021, I would say, it moved out of kind of, agoniesville into being more frustrating. And then I would say in the last year, it's been becoming a lot better, and I've been way less stressed about it. My walking is getting better and better all the time. And, it's not normal yet, but I'm very clear on what the problem has been, essentially everything in my legs. But bit by bit, I have built up the strength that I need, and that will continue. And I'm much more confident now that this problem is being resolved, and I haven't really been stressed about it for a very long time. So that's been the reason. The whole thing's been the book of Job, to be honest with you. It was very unfair, because my whole life was opening up after I recovered from POTS, and I was really excited about life. I was able to go on very long hikes, like 15 kilometers. My world was opening up. I was excited about the kind of work that I was starting to do and everything. But unfortunately, life had other plans for me, and it was utterly ridiculous. That's what happened. But thankfully, anyway, it's doing a lot better. But that was the reason I became sick again, from the stress, the daily stress of that. So, that notwithstanding, I want to just say I have done some other things in these years that I've been proud of. So, from early 2018, I worked a lot on my music. People might know that I also compose music in a contemporary classical style. And I got into a library called Artlist, which is where filmmakers can download music for their projects. So I'll share a link to that down below if anyone would like to listen to my music. It's also on Spotify. Unfortunately, it's not something I've done in the last 3 years. But for the first 3 years of my illness, even though I was quite poorly, I was doing a lot of music. And since that time, since the last 3 years, I've also worked on other things. I've published a couple of books, one of them under a pseudonym, so controversial I can't possibly say what it is, but it was a lot of fun to write. And the other one is a new medical hypothesis, which I regard as far more robust than my POTS book. And it is a medical hypothesis on the causes of extreme thirst in illnesses like ME-CFS, POTS and long COVID, and why I believe this has always been mistakenly viewed as psychogenic water drinking. So I'm going to be making videos about that in the future. So people, I know it's a symptom that a lot of people struggle with. It's something that I struggled with very badly, as you will learn if you follow these videos more. But I resolved it, which still seems like a miracle given where I was at, as you will see. So I've worked on those, and I'm working a lot now on this thirst topic. I'm collaborating with an academic about this, and we're hoping to really change things on that front. So I want to restart this channel now. I want to restart it from a position that is, you know, I'm not here saying like I was before that I'm well and this is how I got better. I'm someone now who is trying to get better. I want to share with people the things that I'm working on. I want to share with people, you know, strategies that I have developed or followed from other people and how it's going for me. But what I really want to do on this channel is talk about the research. This is what I'm most passionate about now, is I want to communicate the nature of ME-CFS and related illnesses and what the research actually says. It's so important because there's a lot of basically crap that goes around on YouTube about ME-CFS in particular, and I want to actually put out what the researchers are finding. It's so important to know what you're actually dealing with. Because for the first half of this illness for me, much as I already had written a book kind of in this area, you're still in the dark. And not being in the dark is so important. So that's what I want to do. I want to talk about the research. I want to have interviews with patients. I want to have interviews with researchers as well. I want this to be a real hub for everything to do with understanding this illness and all of its complexities, as well as ways to improve. And I think that's the best way to frame it. Of course, I'd love to be fully well, but I don't know if that's going to be granted to me. But what I can work on is getting better. And one day, if you can get 5% better, and then 5% better, and 5% better, it may turn into recovery. So that's the way I'm looking at it now. That's the kind of the direction of the channel that I want to go in. I'm also hoping that it may be a little bit more professionally done. I'm not entirely, I mean, as you can see from this video, that's not been the plan for this one. I'm just touching base again. But that's kind of, I also want to really build it, basically. I want to build this up, and I want to really get ideas out there that I think people will want to know about who are struggling with these illnesses. So in the next video, however, I'm going to talk about my POTS book and the 5 or 6 changes, we'll see how many exactly I'll say in the video, but the changes that I would make to it now, just so that we have that also in video form. And then we will take it from there. Okay, so look, it's good to be back. I look forward to hearing from people. I know that actually there's been a lot of new subscribers in the time that I wasn't even doing anything. So look, I look forward to communicating with people, and I'll have various links below to my website and the new book as well, and my music. Okay, all the best for now, and I look forward to the next video.